Everything you do online passes through one piece of software. Your searches, your passwords, your messages, and you've probably never questioned whether it deserves your trust. Opera GX is used by over 20 million people right now. It brands itself as the first browser built for gamers, packed with tools that promise to boost performance, protect your privacy, and look incredible while doing it. But when I started pulling at the threads of this company, what I found underneath was a trail of questionable data practices, corporate shell games, and a predatory lending operation targeting some of the poorest communities on Earth. This is the full story behind Opera GX. To understand Opera GX, you first have to understand why it exists at all. It didn't come from nothing. It was born out of desperation. Opera, the original browser, launched in Norway back in 1995. That's before most people had ever heard the word internet. For a brief window in the late 90s and early 2000s, Opera was actually ahead of its time. Tabbed browsing, built-in search, speed dial pages. Opera introduced features that other browsers would eventually copy years later. At one point, they were genuinely innovative. If the browser war had been decided by ideas alone, Opera might have won it. But innovation alone doesn't win the browser war. When Chrome arrived and Google started paying companies to make it the default search engine everywhere, the landscape shifted permanently. Opera went from being a pioneer to being irrelevant. By the mid-2010s, their global market share had collapsed to under 3%. They still had a strong foothold in parts of Africa and Asia, where their lightweight mobile browser came pre-installed on cheaper devices, but in North America and Europe, nobody was using Opera anymore. The company was facing huge losses. Then in 2016, a lifeline appeared from an unexpected direction. A Chinese consortium led by an investment group called Golden Brick Capital acquired a controlling stake in Opera. Two of the key players in that deal were Kunlun Tech and Qihoo 360. At first, it seemed like these were just investors, but hold on to these names because they're going to matter a lot in a few minutes. After the acquisition, Opera had Chinese money, a struggling Western brand, and a massive need to attract users in higher income markets. The solution they landed on was to build something for one specific market: gamers. Opera built a gaming browser, and not because gamers needed one, but because gamers spend money, they're loyal to brands, and gamers respond to edgy marketing. Think about the timing for a second. A Chinese consortium buys a failing European browser company, and almost immediately, the strategy pivots to targeting young Western audiences with their product dripping in gamer culture. Neon color schemes, angular UI design, built-in Twitch and Discord sidebars, custom sound effects that play every time you open a tab. It was designed from the ground up to feel like it belonged on a streamer's desktop. Then came the marketing blitz. Opera GX went harder on YouTube creator partnerships than almost any tech product in the market at the time. For a while, it seemed like every other tech video had an Opera GX sponsorship. Simultaneously, the social media team turned the brand's Twitter account into one of the most followed meme pages in gaming. Edgy takes, community roasts, viral posts, racking up hundreds of thousands of likes. They even launched a VTuber character that pulled in over 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. It was a full spectrum, extremely online marketing campaign, and honestly, it worked. Within a few years, Opera GX had 20 million users. The rebrand was a masterclass in audience capture. But here's the thing about a masterclass in marketing: it works only until people start looking at what they actually bought. Before we continue, let me introduce you to the sponsor of this video. And no, it's not another expensive service that asks you to pay 3 different subscriptions to use 3 different AIs. Chat LLM by Abacus AI brings together Cloud, ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok, DeepSeek, and more, all in one place. And on top of that, it has Root LLM, which automatically picks the best model depending on what you ask it. It also generates images, videos, and professional presentations, and even humanizes text so no AI detector can flag it. And then there's Abacus AI Deep Agent, which builds full apps and websites from scratch. All of that for just $10 a month, when a single subscription to any of those AIs already costs you that or more. Go to chatllm.abacus.ai or use the link in the description. Now, let's continue. Because despite the viral tweets and the creator sponsorships, the browser itself was nothing the company claimed it to be. The centerpiece of Opera GX is something called GX Control. It lets you set hard limits on how much CPU, RAM, and bandwidth the browser is allowed to consume. The pitch is simple: cap your browser's appetite so your games get more resources. It sounded like a useful feature, but it was entirely meaningless. You see, every modern operating system already has a built-in process scheduler whose entire job is to decide which application get priority access to system resources. That's what every other OS like Windows or Mac OS does. It's a deeply optimized core level function of the software running your entire machine. When Opera GX puts a slider on your screen and says limit CPU to 30%, all it's really doing is placing a crude ceiling on top of a system that was already managing things efficiently. Independent benchmarks have confirmed this over and over again. One independent test on Medium actually measured resource usage across Opera GX, Chrome, and Firefox with identical workloads. With just one tab open, Opera GX consumed 1.68 gigabytes of RAM, Chrome used 1.4 gigabytes, and Firefox used only 1.24 gigabytes. And when they scaled up to 5 tabs, Opera GX shot to 2.39 gigabytes, while Chrome sat at 1.95 and Firefox at 1.85. The browser marketed for gaming performance was the most resource-hungry of all three every single time. And it wasn't just benchmark nerds noticing this. Opera's own forums are filled with users reporting the exact same problem. One user on the official Opera forums wrote that they've been using GX for about a year, and when they first started, it was great, but the longer they used it, the slower it became. They said, and I quote, "I have never felt more lied to in my entire life. They tried everything, disabled settings, turned off extensions, cleared cache and data, nothing helped." They ended the post by saying, "I wouldn't even recommend this browser to my worst enemy. It is pure torture how painfully slow it is." In gaming tests, the frame rate differences between browsers were within the margin of error. On a second run, the results sometimes flipped entirely, and that's when everyone realized the limiter simply gives the user a feeling of control instead of boosting performance. This is a pretty common thing a lot of apps also do, like Battery Doctor, which I made an entire video on that you can check out. Although it became clear that Opera GX was doing nothing to boost performance, it still went a step further and added a ton of wild customization features too. You can install mods that change the background music, add keyboard click sounds, apply full screen visual shaders, and theme every pixel of the interface. It's the most dressed up browser on the market. But a browser's job is to load web pages fast and keep your data safe. Opera GX excels at neither of those things more than its competitors. Underneath the gamer skin, it runs on Chromium, the exact same engine that powers Chrome, Edge, and Brave. The architecture is identical. In simple words, it's exactly like using any other browser, just with more bells and whistles. There's also a tab called GX Corner that lives permanently inside your browser. You cannot fully disable it. It surfaces game release dates, links to free-to-play titles, and promotional deals. All of that sounds helpful until you realize most of those links are affiliate tracked, meaning Opera earns revenue every time you click through and sign up for something. Those free games in the corner, most are browser-based titles straight out of 2008 or links that redirect you to subscription services through Opera's referral pipeline. It's a storefront disguised as a feature, embedded in software you already installed, and it cannot be removed. You can shove it into the sidebar, but every time you close your last tab, there it is again. One more thing that felt almost forceful was the setup process of this browser. Opera GX defaults to launching at startup. The moment your computer boots, this browser wants to be running, which isn't normal browser behavior. That's the kind of thing you expect from Bloatware. Multiple users have reported that when they tried to uninstall Opera GX, the browser didn't even show up in their app section or control panel. It just kept running in the background like it never left. Some had to resort to third-party uninstall tools or manually dig through registry files just to fully remove it from their system. One frustrated user on Opera's own forums wrote, "The frustration with trying to uninstall it has completely gotten rid of the maybe I'll reinstall it later thought. It should not be this difficult to uninstall a program." Another described the entire experience as the browser behaving like malware because the built-in uninstaller simply refused to work. They had to manually delete folders and clean the Windows registry to get rid of it. For a browser that wants you to trust it with your data, it sure doesn't want to leave when you ask it to. Now, everything I've described so far is mostly just disappointing marketing. Annoying maybe, misleading, sure, but not sinister. The sinister part starts when you look at what Opera GX does with your data. Security researchers have documented that on its very first launch, Opera GX fires off dozens of unsolicited network requests before you've typed a single character. one investigation found that Oprah made 83 unsolicited requests on its first launch alone, including connections to unexpected domains like Lois.com. Among those requests is a call to geolocation service that returns your city, zip code, latitude, and longitude, not an approximate region, your precise position. Other Chromium browsers don't behave this way. Chrome doesn't ping geo IP services at startup, Brave doesn't either, and even if you disable location tracking during installation, the request still goes out. This isn't just something researchers noticed in a lab, real users are feeling it too. On Oprah's own forums, one user wrote that they'd read through the privacy policy themselves and didn't feel at ease because the policy wasn't specific about what information is collected or what it's used for. Then there's the built-in VPN, which Oprah promotes as a privacy tool. A real VPN encrypts your traffic and routes it through independent servers so your internet provider and potential attackers can't see what you're doing. Oprah's version routes your traffic to Oprah's own infrastructure. It doesn't use independent servers. It's functionally a proxy, not a VPN, and it channels everything you do online directly through a company that's already collecting your coordinates. Whether that traffic is meaningfully encrypted on their end or it's used by them for whatever reason is unclear. But they do claim a no-logs policy. However, without an independent audit or a real-world legal test proving it, that claim is just a sentence on a website. So who exactly is receiving all of this data? That's where the corporate structure gets uncomfortable. Kunlun Tech, one of the Chinese firms that acquired Oprah, previously purchased the dating app Grindr. The acquisition raised immediate alarms because it placed the intimate personal data of millions of users, including information about sexual orientation and private communications, under the control of a company subject to Chinese national intelligence law. The law allows the Chinese government to compel any domestic company to hand over data on demand. The risk was considered so severe that the US government intervened and forced Kunlun Tech to divest from Grindr entirely. The other investor, Qihoo 360, faced its own wave of scrutiny. It produced a children's smartwatch that allegedly tracked the location of minors and could remotely capture photos without the user's knowledge. The company was eventually hit with US sanctions. When confronted, Qihoo 360 responded by accusing American intelligence agencies of running a decade-long espionage campaign against Chinese industry. These are the firms with financial influence over the company behind your browser. Oprah maintains that it operates independently under Norwegian jurisdiction and European data protection law, and to their credit, GDPR compliance is a meaningful legal shield. But Oprah's own privacy policy acknowledges that data can be transferred to and processed by other entities within the Oprah corporate group, and one of those entities operates in China. And if the data practices on the corporate ownership weren't enough to make you uneasy, what comes next will. Because Oprah didn't just build a browser, they built a money-lending empire. Between 2018 and 2020, they launched short-term loan apps in Kenya, Nigeria, and India. The model was simple: offer small, fast loans to people where traditional banking is limited, then bury the real cost in fine print. The stated penalty for late repayment was a 2% daily rollover fee. Sounds harmless, but compounded over a year, that's over 700% annual interest. A $30 loan left unpaid for 12 months would balloon to $240. The apps advertise large loans with generous repayment windows to attract downloads. Once inside, the actual offers were far smaller and far shorter. And if a borrower missed a payment, even by a single day, the app would access their phone contacts and start calling friends and family. Not polite reminders, threats. Contacts were told that if they didn't help repay the loan, both they and the borrower would be placed on a national credit blacklist. Someone takes out a $30 loan because they can't make rent, misses one payment, and suddenly their mother is getting threatening calls from a company owned by a Nigerian Chinese web browser corporation. That was really happening. Then Hindenburg Research stepped in. This is a firm that tears apart financial statements for a living, and what they found was ugly. They accused Oprah's CEO of quietly funneling company money into businesses he personally controlled. We're talking about a $9.5 million buyout of a company the CEO already owned. And this was just the beginning of it. Another $30 million bet on a private karaoke app the CEO had just picked up was also alleged. This was an app that internal documents said was a money pit with zero chance of recovery. Opera's public response to the lending allegations was that they were providing financial access to underserved communities. On the interest rate math, they called Hindenburg's calculations inaccurate. The math is straightforward: 2% times 365 days. Anyone with a calculator can verify it. And of course, that response has since been removed from their website. So take a step back and look at the full picture. You have a browser that promises gaming performance it can't measurably deliver. Its headline features are placebos, it has a permanent ad tab you can't remove, it grabs your exact coordinates the moment you open it, even after you told it not to. Its VPN is a proxy routing your data to a company's own servers with no verified encryption, and outside the browser, the company ran a predatory lending operation charging 700% interest to vulnerable borrowers and harassing their families when they couldn't pay, while its leadership allegedly funneled millions into personally held entities. All of it was sold to you wrapped in memes, neon lights, and a VTuber. Now, to be fair, Opera's GDPR argument regarding the Chinese spyware claim carries real legal weight. They're publicly traded, so outright lying to shareholders would be illegal, and the browser itself isn't malware. It loads websites, runs well, and basically does all the browser things. But when you weigh everything together, it's just not worth the trade-off. Not when Brave, Firefox, and LibreFox exist without any of this baggage. If privacy matters, then there are browsers built for that. If efficiency matters, plain Chromium beats Opera GX in benchmarks without a single gaming feature. Your browser is the front door to everything you do online. It sees every password, every message, and every search. It deserves more scrutiny than most people give it. And Opera GX is counting on the fact that you won't look past the paint. Let me know what you think. If you're using Opera GX right now, does any of this change your mind? Drop it in the comments, I'm genuinely curious. And if you got this far, you're clearly someone who cares about what software is actually doing on your machine. If that sounds like you, subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and come hang out in our Discord community. The link's in the description, it's free, and it's full of people who actually dig into this kind of stuff instead of just taking a company's word for it. Oh, and speaking of browsers that deserve more attention, there's one thing that Google has been actively trying to bury. Most people have never even heard of it. I made a full video breaking down why. It's right here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.